Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him.
As birds flying, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending also, he will deliver it, and passing over, he will preserve it.
For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be.
For behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariot like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many.
Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Yahweh. I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, and we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahweh Shai. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth that are waiting on the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. Today we're doing a lesson. It's actually not going to be super long, because the amount of information that was spewed out concerning this subject by the Genesis Israelites, who we have talked about in time past, formerly of Sakari, the newly named or self-proclaimed priest Hakah, and his sidekick Hakah. And they left Sakari last year, and since then they've been on this tear of basically throwing out various doctrines. Many of them, the doctrines that they're pushing out, are either remix versions of the same doctrine that they already pushed with a twist, or it's a brand new doctrine that they hadn't been pushing out. And we have to go into the motivation behind some of this, and it's becoming more apparent as far as what their motivation is about. Now, the very interesting thing about this is that this all started when it came to there was a live stream that Tazariak from IUIC did concerning him being contacted by the likes of Vocab Malone, who is basically set himself as an arch enemy of the Israelite community. If you are so-called black in particular, and you view or believe yourself to be a descendant of the Israelites going back to Jacob, he comes up against anybody who believes that position. And it's very interesting that he was contacted or had been in contact with the likes of Hakah and Assad concerning potentially setting up a debate with Tazariak about, can non-Israelites receive salvation? Now, we have our criticisms of Tazariak and ISUBK. As you know, a few weeks ago, we did a live stream concerning his leader, the one that they call General Yohana, who is the head of ISUBK, concerning his commentary, concerning his talks concerning the state of so-called black people in America on a podcast. And you can watch that in looking in our history, and you can see what that was about. But we're not here to talk about that. We believe the reason why he selected Tazariak is because they believe that Tazariak is not sharp enough to catch a lot of the precepts that they will be throwing out and the way they interpret it. In fact, the presentation that Hakah and Assad did was extremely long, and it was a lot of information. And if you pay close attention, you realize that they were actually changing up the meaning of what was being said within the precepts they're bringing out, because they have the slideshow, and in the slideshow, they're basically summarizing, but they're reading it out as if it's an actual precept. So if you are not familiar with the precepts that they were talking about on their show, then you're going to assume that what they were saying was right, unless you really were paying attention. Okay, so I probably watched or listened to about 2 hours of it, maybe an hour and 45 minutes of it. And it was not, it basically, there was partly clickbait and partly a pivot towards a different area that is very similar to a lot of people who hold to this type of ideal or ideology. Okay, so I'm going to actually pull up. Let me go ahead and do this real quick. Share my screen. The video that's in question. Okay, so this is from one of their pages. This is the live stream they did last night where they talked about this stuff. And their doctrine, here's part of the problem with their doctrine. And like I said, it's this video, literally, the video here is 3 hours and 46 minutes long. Okay. So they have the end where they had people call in either to congratulate them for pivoting towards this direction, and people that were calling in to also challenge them on their position. They actually have a PDF, which I do have. I have the PDF, and I'm going to kind of cut through some of the slides for the sake of this discussion. It is very long. The slides is 175 slides. So truth be told, I don't think anybody's going to be able to go through each slide and do it all the way through because it'll be too much. So probably the best thing is for those that are brothers that want to understand certain false doctrines and how to destroy them, then you can listen to the stream and have a discussion about this particular subject. So let's see here. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and play the beginning part of it, and so that way you can kind of hear what a little bit of their position is. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into a few different precepts, and also we'll go through some of the slide, but not all of the slide, because again, it's like 175 pages on that slide. Okay. Which explains their doctrine.
Non-Israelites can receive salvation. First and foremost, let's give all praises, honor, and glory to our Heavenly Father, Yahweh. We do so by Shema Mashiach Yahweh Shai. It's Priest Sakai, joined by my beloved brother.
It's Brother Asai. What's going on, everybody?
And we don't want to waste no time, y'all. We want to get right into it. I want to address something real quick, because we don't want to take away from all this edification with drama, slander, and gossip. I heard there was some proof of an expose from our brother over there, and I just want to say, if you got that, expose it. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to get on no back and forth little kid shit. We want to make this about edification for the body and the nation. So we're getting right into it. Let me share my screen.
And yeah, listen, y'all going to want to make sure y'all pay attention. That's all I'm going to say. All praise to the Most High. So y'all see the title of the video. This is not clickbait. There's been speculation that we just did this to try to garner some attention or garner some clout. I don't think we need clout. I don't want clout. If I have it, you can have it back. The point is, it's about the truth. And this is, again, not clickbait. Non-Israelites receive salvation. Now,
the PDF, Salakia, the PDF will be in the description box. We did not have enough time to get the PDF for this presentation in the description box, but it will be in a prescription box. This is what we're seeing right now. Disclaimer. This is what we're seeing right now. This is the understanding we come to right now. We would love a peer review. We don't want to debate. We can have a private discussion, peer review it, do it public, whatever. We don't need to debate, but peer review us and show us where you may see us in error. We're open for that. You understand?
Yeah, I want to just add, I'm glad you said that, because that's something I definitely wanted to address. There's a stigma that we have as an organization, particularly with myself and Priest, that we just want to debate everybody and show everybody how much smarter we are than them and show them that they're nothing. If that's the type of, if that's what we're giving, if that's what, what it looks like we're out to do, then I would like to take this time to apologize if that's what it's looked like. We are very firm in what we believe. And for the past several years in the truth, we have been really on the front line going against all different type of ideologies that have been coming up against the truth. So because of that, maybe we took it in, not maybe, I'll say, you know what, I'm not going to say like maybe and leave room for it's not my fault. I'll say I'm sorry, everybody, if that's what it's if that's what it looks like. But with this in particular, this is something that's very important. And if there's a debate in the future in regards to it, cool. If not, cool. I would like for brothers, like Priest said, to look at it. If you have any questions on it, of course, hit us up. If you like to talk about it behind closed doors, it doesn't have to be a debate. Don't got to be heated. It can be all love. So all praises to the Most High.
All praises. So we'll just bounce back and forth through the spirit. I want to start just because I also have to play a clip. I have to play this clip for everybody so you can see how hard this is for us, right? So non-Israelites receive salvation. If you look at the picture, you can kind of tell what we believe the Bible to be saying in its entirety.
So you heard what they said leading up. Now they're going to go into their doctrine, and as you go through, they bring in things that is stuff that people already know about certain people that were not Israelites being treated well, in part because of how they treated Israel. That kind of goes without saying, okay? Because you can actually see that in various parts of the Bible, but that didn't mean that they were receiving salvation. And I think one of the things that we have to do is ultimately define what something is instead of throwing out these terms, okay? So when you read here, it says, we understand that brothers want to kill us. Now they bring out the precept or from the book of Acts about what the threat that was made towards Paul about they didn't want him to live because what he was talking about. When you actually read in context, and this is the reason why it's very important, I think a lot of people have been so consumed in their Israelite identity carnally that now when they read the Bible, they view things from a different lens. And what the lens is about what is a Jew and what is a Gentile. And this was the major flaw that they didn't understand in regards to why the other Israelites, the ones that didn't believe in Yahushua, why they wanted to take out Paul is because of who he was going to, because of what they were doing, not because they were not of the seed of Jacob, but because of what they were living. And this is why it's important to understand, to read the book of Maccabees, the division between those that were in idolatry and those that kept to the law of the fathers. You could see that in the book of Maccabees, and there was actually a civil war over it, which led to the Hasmonean dynasty being created, and then the separate, state or basically entity that survived within Judea, and pretty much that the area of the Holy Land throughout the time of the rest of the time of the Greeks until the Romans came under Caesar and later used Antipater, the Idumean, to overthrow that particular leadership structure that we had in the land. Okay, and that's leading into the time of Yahushua being born. Okay, so you have to understand historical context when you're reading these things, and this is kind of where your own identity superseding what's in the Bible at the time, and you thinking that they're thinking something else. Okay, and this is the reason why we have to talk about these things. And the beautiful thing about it is a lot of this stuff can be dispelled by really going through the context of the chapters and identifying what is and what isn't. Okay, so let me see what we got here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring this out in Isaiah. Okay, so we're dealing with the topic of salvation. I'm going to start at Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 11. Thus saith Yahweh, the Lord, the Holy One of Israel and his Maker. Ask me of things to come concerning my sons. So again, he's saying this concerning my sons. Okay. He's the Holy One of Israel. So Israel's the only nation that's being thought of. Ask me the things concerning my sons, and concerning the work of my hands command ye me. I have made the earth and created man upon it. So we know who's talking. It is not a regular man talking. It's not. This is what is being spoken by the prophet, because the prophet is a spokesman of the Lord. Okay, so I have made the earth and created man upon it. Even my hands have stretched out the heavens, and all their hosts have I commanded. I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city, and he shall let go my captives, not for price nor reward, saith the Lord of hosts. So who was going to do that? Who is the he that was going to was going to direct his ways and raise him up in righteousness and build the city? Okay, what cities are talking about? The New Jerusalem, in which the captives, he will let go of my captives. Okay, so we go on to verse 14. Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh, the labor of Egypt and merchandise of Ethiopia and of the Sabians, men of stature, shall come over unto thee. Who is the thee? Concerning my sons. Okay, the children of Israel. Okay, those are the sons he's referring to. They're going to come over to thee, unto thee, and they shall be thine. They shall come after thee in chains. They shall come over, and they shall fall down unto thee. They shall make supplication unto thee, saying, surely God is in thee, and there is none else. There is no God. Meaning there is no other God. There's none else but the God that's in thee. Verily thou art a God that hideth himself, O God of Israel, the Savior. They shall be ashamed and also confounded. All of them, they shall go to confusion together that are makers of idols. So who are the makers of idols? Okay. The makers of idols is other nations. Okay. The other nations other than Israel. And then the Israelites that rebelled, they followed after their gods. That's why they're confounded. Okay. So when everything is settled, when Yahushua comes and they realize that the elect of Israel, that God is in them and there's no other God, they're going to be ashamed and in confusion that they were makers of idols to begin with. See, a lot of times we don't even understand that the rest of the world, the other people that remain on the earth after all the global destruction that occurs, that when they realize that what they believed in, okay, white Jesus, okay, Allah, believing that Muhammad was the last prophet, Buddha, Krishna, so on and so forth, all these different religious worship that they had and all their idols, all the temples that are out there in Thailand, all the stuff that you've seen, makers of their own hands, okay, that they worship, they made even animals idols. They worshipped as their own gods. They're going to be ashamed and confounded, all of them together. But even though they're going to be ashamed and confounded on that day when all is revealed, when all is revealed, what the true God of the universe is, and his son is made known, they're still not getting everlasting salvation. And that's why you read here in verse 17. But Israel shall be saved in the Lord with an everlasting salvation. Ye shall not be ashamed nor confounded, world without end. Because they're not going to be ashamed and confounded because they were worshiping the one true God. Okay? They're not going to be ashamed and confounded. Okay. So this is the reason why it's important for these guys. Let me tell you something. Hakkad and Assad, because they're able to throw out a bunch of scriptures and they're able to throw them out in rapid succession and for long periods of time, the simple-minded are going to believe and hang on every single word. Plus, a lot of y'all are respecter of persons. And because they were part of a group that was known and more popular, y'all are going to take hold of their words more dear than what the truth is at the end of the day. And that's okay. If you're being led astray because of respect of persons and you don't care for the truth, then the Most High is leading you towards destruction. But the truth is right here in front of you. Okay? So let me see if we can pull up something. Yeah, we got some more. Because it coincides with this as well. Now look at the title. A call to worship the Lord, the righteous judge. Okay? So here's a new song being sung. This is Psalm 96, starting at verse 1. Oh, sing unto the Lord a new song. Sing unto the Lord all the earth. Sing unto the Lord, bless his name. Shew forth his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the heathen, his wonders among all people. For the Lord is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols. Again, for all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord Yahweh made the heavens. Okay? So plain and simple right there. A lot of times these guys, they want to make things complex when it's really simple. That's why it took them 3 hours to explain their doctrine. Why is it taking them 3 hours to explain their own doctrine? Why do they got 175 slides? Because they had to add a lot of stuff. Okay. So let's listen to some of their stuff and hear what they got to say. In fact, I'm gonna have to in a way, we're going to go to the how did we get here part, and then we're gonna respond to what they're saying.
Last 100.
Yeah.
So we don't need Paul to prove this, but you definitely can see that he's clearly in certain instances, in a lot of instances, not talking to ethnic Israelites. So let's go. All right. So what we are not saying the nations won't be judged. We are not saying the nations are not going into captivity. We are not saying God loves everybody. We're not saying Gentiles are equal to Israel in the kingdom. That's what we're not saying. What we are saying, according to the Old Testament and New Testament, non-Israelites who believe can receive salvation at the same time as Israel. How? By believing on the Messiah and keeping the commandments. Can we prove this in the Bible? Absolutely.
Okay, and that's one of their blunders right there. Okay, so they're saying that Israelites and non-Israelites, meaning if you're not of the seed of Jacob, you can receive salvation. Here's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that when you go to the covenants, the old and the new is only for Israelites. There is no place where the new or the old covenant, it goes towards the other nations. So how in the world are they going to believe when the covenant Yahushua was the testator of a better and new covenant. Okay? It tells you that when you read the epistles. Hebrews 8:8 tells you that who it's for. Even Romans 9, they'd have to throw away Romans 9, because in Romans 9 literally goes down and excludes the other descendants of Abraham, and said that yes, they did not do anything wrong, but for election's sake, this is how the Most High did it. He chose Jacob and put aside the other children, and the Most High raised up Egypt to be great and to be taken down. Same thing that he's going to do with Esau, Edom. He's raising them up to the heights of heaven, to where everybody feels like no one can take him down, and then he's going to be taken down. All because that is the Most High's will. This is where we have to develop the mind of the Most High and not be offended by his plans. And to say that other nations can access him at the same time, we're doing actually something that is against what the actual scriptures say. And the reason why they're doing this is because there's two things that they're getting that they don't really properly define. One, they don't properly define Gentile in regards to its context and when it's used, and they don't properly define salvation, which we're definitely going to get into before we're done with the stream, Lord willing. Okay?
Without Paul, their salvation is escaping the plagues, lake of fire, and hardcore bondage. What does the Bible say they'll be? How does it depict it? They will be vassals able to travel to and fro from their homeland to Israel to pay homage. That is basically our mission statement. Yeah. Go ahead, Asad.
And that right there is already found in Isaiah 60. That's already known. How are they going to bring in themselves as workers or any other resources, precious metals, and things like that, bringing their goods that they're going to be given as tribute? That's already known. So everybody in the Israelite community that has deeply studied this, or even in a lot of these other big camps, it's already understood that that's how it's going to be set up. So what this is more sounding like is, and mind you, he just said that they can believe in the Messiah for salvation. This is where he's very wrong. Now, he's right on what he said as far as the quote-unquote vassal. So where he defines a vassal state. Vassal states have always existed. Vassal states exist now. It's just that they're called democracies. They're no longer called kingdoms. They're just called democracies. Okay? Yeah, you have a few quote-unquote kingdoms, but a lot of these kingdoms are structured more in a modern way. But the kingdom of Saudi Arabia is, for example, structured more like an ancient kingdom. Same thing with certain ones. You have like the sultans, right? Sultan of Brunei is an example of a monarchy that rules. Okay, so you still have those, but for the most part, you have more elected officials known as presidents or prime ministers that represent the country from a diplomatic standpoint, right? As quote unquote heads of states. Yet at the end of the day, they're still vassals of largely the United States and the NATO countries. Okay, that's the reason why if you look at even French-speaking Africa, they have the French currency tied to their economy because they're vassals. Okay, that's why they had to use currency that was circulated or controlled by the French. Okay, that's the reason why countries like in the United States can invade places like Haiti. They can go and bomb Venezuela. They can basically go around the world and involve and invade whole countries, take down their political heads of state, and get resources and set up people that will then act as go-betweens for resources that are basically tributes to go to the elites of Edom. Okay, so we've never been against this, And that was part of the thing. 50% of what they said was on point. The other 50% was wrong, was dead wrong. Okay.
So here's the definition of a vassal. So the definition is a subordinate, under, is a subordinate nation serving a superior kingdom, retaining its land, but obligated to serve, obey, and bring goods. That's what we're saying, that you could so-called say good or righteous
believing.
And remember, there's no time that any Israelite group ever said that Israel's going to take every other nation's lands. Remember that the land of Israel that was prophesied to be given to the descendants of Abraham, that later that promise went to Isaac, later that promise went to Jacob and his sons, was going to be from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. So the other nations will have their own land, and part of our territory we will share with certain nations. Okay, I'm not going to go into that, but there will be part of it where within the borders there'll be certain portions that will be occupied by the other nations, in which they themselves will have access to that land, and they will give a portion of their increase to Israel, just like all the other nations will. Okay, and they're going to have to send out hard labor bondage. You can see an example of this when we had our kingdom rulership. In fact, let me go ahead and look for that real quick. It made me think about it. And I will show you an example. Okay, you're going to see examples in I think it's Second Chronicles. Well, I think it's in Kings too, but we can go to Second Chronicles. Give me a moment. Okay. So watch this. So as you know, during the time of around the 1000 BC, or the 10th century BCE, as it's known, 10th century before the Common Era, Solomon was ruling over the United Kingdom of Israel, which also was acting as an empire. Okay, because we had hegemony over the other nations around us that were defeated under King David. So the time of Solomon was a time of reign of peace. And during this time of peace, it was a small glimpse into what the kingdom will look like, okay? And how it would look like ruling over the other nations. Now watch this, Hakim. You see here, Solomon will build a temple and palace, right? Second Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 1. And Solomon determined to build a house for the name of the Lord, and an house for his kingdom. And Solomon told out 70,000 men to bear burdens. Okay, so he requested 70,000 men to bear burdens, which is 70,000. Score is 20. So 20,000. So 20,000 times 3 is 60, plus 10,000 is 70,000. And 80,000 to hew in the mountains. So that 80,000 is another 80,000 to hew in the mountain, and 3,600. Okay, so 3,600. So 3,600 to oversee them. Now, if you ever know about when you have burdens laid upon people that are basically your servants, that you forced into these burdens, you have them in different areas. One was to bear the burdens, which means to carry the loads that will be cut down from the mountains. Okay, and then you have another smaller amount that oversees the operation, basically managers / supervisors. Okay. And Solomon sent to Hiram, the king of Tyre, saying, as thou didst deal with David my father, and didst send him cedars to build him an house to dwell therein, even so deal with me. Behold, I build an house to the name of the Lord my God, to dedicate it to him, and to burn before him sweet incense, and for a continual showbread, and for the burnt offerings morning and evening, on the Sabbaths and on the new moons, and on the solemn feasts of the Lord our God. This is an ordinance forever to Israel. Okay, so this is an ordinance forever to Israel. Okay, so wait, why wasn't the Prince of Tyre or the King of Tyre, why wasn't he included in that? He let him know it's the Yahweh my God, and this ordinance is to Israel forever. Okay, he requested King of Tyre to do for him. Okay, so they had to build burdens. In fact, let's go down to some of the stuff that they did, right? So watch this. And mind you, we just kind of went into the above all the other gods, right? And Psalm 96 and 5. Now, as you go down to the 5th verse, it says, and the house which I build is great, for great is our God above all gods. So he's telling him this. He's telling Hiram, the king of Tyre, that the God of Israel is above all gods. I mean, it's above your God too. Because when he's saying "our," he's talking about the children of Israel. He's not talking about the God of Tyre of Hiram. Hiram has a different God. They worship Baal in Tyre. You could look it up. In Tyre, their God was Baal. Balaam is another name. Okay. And they had an idol for him too that they worshiped, by the way. In fact, let me go ahead and pull it up. Because this guy's talking about they can worship God and they're gonna do it on this side. No, there's a sequence. You know, one of the things that's been coming in my mind is something called is basically thinking about sequence. You can do something right, but do it at the wrong time. Or you can, and the same thing happens in the Bible. You have to know about the timing of everything, of when everything is going to occur. Okay. So okay, I can't even do this. Let me do this right here. So look at this right here. Melkart, god of ancient Tyre. And it says here, Melkart, the god of ancient Tyre, was a central deity in the Phoenician and Punic pantheons. He was associated with the monarchy, who was the monarchy? Hiram. Sea, colonization, and commercial enterprise. Melkart was often depicted as a bearded figure with a high and round hat and a kilt, holding an Egyptian Ankh symbol of life and fenestrated axe symbol of death. His temple in Tyre was a significant site for annual winter and spring festivals. So they had a temple. They had a temple for Melkart, and Solomon was building a temple for his God. Okay, now peep this. Look what it says. Now, mind you, I'm just doing this. We just flowing with the spirit on this. His temple in Tyre, right? For the spring and winter and spring festivals, it is believed to have been the model of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Melkart. Now, this is one of the reasons why, more than likely, that's basically a theory that the temple was so vast and so put together a certain way that Solomon used it as a figure or a model for the one in Jerusalem, which is the reason why he hired Hiram. But that's really not the case. Okay, it's just that they knew how to build extravagant temples, which they did already for their own god. Now, Melkart was also equated with the Babylonian Nergal, god of the underworld and death, and was considered the head of the pantheon of Tyre. His name king of the means king of the city, Malakart. Okay, because Malak is king, Kart is city. Okay, and he was referred to as Baal Desor, or Lord of Tyre. Melkart also the pantheon of the sea, fertility, hunting, and colonization. And the reason why colonization keeps coming up, because the Phoenicians ended up during that time that they were worshiping this particular god, they were going and colonizing large parts of the Mediterranean, okay, known as the Phoenician Empire. Okay, you can look up the Phoenicians and their influence in the Mediterranean. Okay, and their influence came up during the time of Solomon, which you could read about when Solomon had Hiram, who had ships, and Solomon had ships, and then he would have them go and get different resources for Solomon. And they stationed ships out in Tarshish, which is modern day Spain. Okay, and that's a whole nother subject, okay, in and of itself. So we see that the god of Tyre was not the god. So when he says our God is when he says here in verse 5 again, and the house which I build is great, for great is our God above all gods. Huh? So what are we talking about, Willis? You know? And to give you an idea, let's share the image, the god of the ancient Tyre, which is the idol that Hiram would have been worshiping. This is the god, Melkart. This is the idol that they were carrying around. Okay. This is an image of Tyre. Okay, it's a city right off the coast of modern day Lebanon that is built based off of it's basically based off of defense, right? Because you see the city walls and the water. That's why, if you know about the Alexander, when he captured Tyre, it took them many years because they had to tear through the city walls. They had to build like a way from the other side of the land to get to there, and then siege, break down the walls, and you can see the big temple in the middle of the city. Okay, that's just an image. It no longer exists. A lot of that was torn down. Okay, so it does have some ancient ruins if you were to travel to Tyre. Okay, so for those of y'all that travel, this is what he did, made a causeway. See, Alexander had to build a causeway to get to Tyre, and the city had a wall. Okay, and this was the harbor that they had where they put their ships. This is the harbor that they had on this side as well. Okay, where they can dock their ships. So the other nations, they're going to go and use their resources. They're going to use their labor to bring to Israel. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and keep reading on this as well. So verse 6, but who is able to build him an house, seeing the heaven of heavens cannot contain him? Who am I then that I should build him an house, save only to burn sacrifice before him? Send me now, therefore, a man cunning to work. So remember, he's talking to Hiram of Tyre, okay? Not an Israelite, a Canaanite. Send me now, therefore, a man cunning to work in gold and in silver and in brass and in iron and in purple and crimson and blue, and that can skill to grave with the cunning men that are with me in Judah and in Jerusalem, whom my father did provide. So there was already men in Judah and Jerusalem that were already provided for the task by David before he passed away. Okay, so then he also wanted him to send another man that was good at that as well. Okay, that would serve the purpose. Send me also cedar trees, fir trees, and algum trees out of Lebanon, for I know that thy servants can skill to cut timber in Lebanon, and behold, my servants shall be with thy servants. And guess what? The servants of Solomon are higher than the servants of Tyre, of Hiram. And they were going to have to bring this. So mind you, there's no trucks back then. They got to cut cedar, fir, and algum trees from Lebanon and bring them down to Jerusalem. Boy, that's a heavy burden, bro. Okay? That's a heavy burden. Even to prepare me timber in abundance, for the house which I am about to build shall be wonderful, great. So then he wasn't playing with the project. Okay? Now, this is a glimpse into how it would be, because we like structure. Okay, it's not going to be a whole bunch of people of the other nations just sitting around. It's going to be, hey, we're going to talk to your royal line, your king, who we're going to first bound. They're going to first be bound, because that's how they're going to be caught. They're going to be bound and then forced to do certain things. Okay, and mind you, they're not going to be able to. If they get hurt, if they hurt their back, they're going to hurt their back bringing them goods. This is what it is. Okay? But to say that they're going to be saved is crazy work. Okay? We read Isaiah 45:17, everlasting salvation is for Israel. Okay? Because after these people were doing these things, they were still worshiping their idols. They didn't change. They were worshiping their idols. Okay? So let's go ahead and go back and listen to some more of this, and we'll see if we can go a little bit further up, because there was something that I wanted to, let's say we were teaching wrong. Yeah, that whole let's say we're teaching wrong is goofy. I don't even want to go through that. Okay. Then they bring out different people that were throughout the Old Testament that were treated a certain way. Now, here's part of the problem with this. We're going to go to Isaiah 56. So let me go ahead and go to where they bring it out. And bear with me. Let me make sure I have it also on my end when it comes to the precept. So I'm going to get the context of Isaiah 56 as well.
Linguistic scholar to prove it, that has joined himself to the Lord, not be chained or enslaved, but will live as righteous vassals under Israel's authority. Under Israel's authority.
So look at this right here. Believing Gentiles in the kingdom will not be chained or enslaved, but will live as righteous vassals under Israel's authority, because they believed on Christ and kept the commandments before his return. They will be allowed to dwell in peace, bring their riches, honor, and tribute to Jerusalem. Here's part of the problem. They have to, in order for them to bring riches and the tribute of all their things, they have to labor for that. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. If they bring in gold, they had to mine it. If they're bringing silver, they had to mine it. If they're bringing flocks of herd, they had to raise them and feed them and then bring them to you. So tribute is part of their labor. That's why the word for work in Spanish is trabajo, which goes back to Latin, which that's the root word that goes back to tribute. It's basically your work. When you're bringing tribute, you're bringing your labor. It's just it's a sample of your labor. It's just like if I give somebody an ounce of gold, and an ounce of gold is worth $1,000, I'm literally giving them labor that they don't have to earn. So essentially, my labor that acquired that ounce of gold, which was worth $1,000, if I give it to somebody, I'm literally giving them portion of my labor. My labor is tied to the value of what I gave them. So that's the reason why when they would tax, that's the reason why tax collectors and were a big deal, because they were actually taking and robbing people of their labor through taxing. When you work at the plantation and you see your paycheck and a third of that money is being taken out by taxes, that is a portion of your labor being taken away. And whatever the government wants to do with that, they can do with that, and there's nothing you can do about it. We have to think deeper and not allow people like Hakah and Hassad to pull one over on you. They're playing you as if you're simple-minded. You need to get more educated on these type of things, Akim. Okay? Because this whole, they're not going to be this, they're not going to be that, they're going to not get everlasting salvation. I'm going to tell you that much. Okay? They're not going to get everlasting salvation, bro. Okay? So let's hear what he got to say.
They have to pay homage, basically worship in the sense of proskuneo, the Israelites. Because why? They believe on Christ and kept the commandments before his return. Where does the Old Testament prophecy say that? Where does eschatology say that? Don't worry. They will be allowed to dwell in peace, bring their riches, honor, and tribute to Jerusalem, not the other way around. Then they get to return to their own lands. That's not in chains and bondage. And this happens right when we get to the kingdom.
Remember that we read about the people being brought in chains when we were reading in Isaiah 45. If you read up for context, we show you that the other nations will be in chains. Okay. In fact, let's get this real quick. Okay. Because remember, he talks about kingdoms and vassals as well, right? Remember, he talks about kingdoms and vassals. So let me get this real quick. Hold on, Akim. Which it's funny because he brings it up, I think, later on in the he brings it up later on in his stream. Okay. So when you go into Isaiah, when you go into Isaiah, you have a various precepts that go into hold on, somebody's messaging me. Yeah, so when you go into Isaiah and we look into like how this is all going to end up, we have to understand how these people are going to be forced into this condition. Okay. And that's part of how it has to go down. Now we go to Isaiah 49:5, which is one of my favorite, Isaiah 49, not Isaiah, but Psalms 149 is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible because it's pretty much the end. This is basically how the ending of all this madness we're going through is going to come about, right? So as we go to verse 5, it says, "Let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people." So that why do they have a sword in their hand? Because they're going to execute vengeance. They're going to put them to death. Punishments upon the people. Okay? Those mine enemies that I would not, that I should reign over them, bring them hither and slay them before me. So how is the Most High going to send his son to come back, crush the heathen, and then also at the same time punish the rebellious of the people that did not want to follow him the right way or did not want to follow him at all? Maybe they attempted to, but they were going down the broad way. They didn't go take the straight gate. They said baptism wasn't required. They say you don't need to know the name. They said you an Israelite, you're going to be in the kingdom anyway. The ones that was false teaching, pushing false doctrine, they got to get punished. That's why we have to warn you, brothers and sisters, about this doctrine that's out here. And if y'all have a problem with violence being executed, then you have a problem with the Most High, because this is his storyline and this is how he's going to do it. And if you don't like it, then you're going to be on the bad end of everything, because you trusted not his word, and you said that he shouldn't do that. You said the God that you worship doesn't do that. So your God must be Barney then. Okay? Your God must be Barney, and our God is Yahweh. Okay? Yeah, see here, Malachi Obadiah, it says, Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 16. Therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity. And they that spoil thee shall be a spoil, all of them, right? All that prey upon thee will I give for a prey. Exactly. And here's the thing that a lot of these guys don't understand. You had righteous prophets going into captivity when the nation fell. Does Genesis Israelites not read their Bible? Righteous men that were warning the people to return from their ways and stop basically going a whoring after the other idols of the nations, they went into captivity with them. They had to serve the elites of the nations and where they were captured. If they weren't put to death, they had no problem taking the sons of the kings, blotting out the eyes of the kings of Israel and Judah. They had no problem taking captive the prophets, the children. So let me get this. Hakkar and Assad are pushing this narrative that the other nations are just going to be treated well. It's going to be just grandiose for a portion, because they're going to end up believing this is kind of what happens when someone is trying to expand their market when it comes to this YouTube thing. Their doctrine is extremely similar to that of Truth Unedited. It's the exact same doctrine. Hierarchy system, which we already teach that there's going to be a racial hierarchy in terms of your biblical nationality. That's already known by those that are attuned and versed in understanding eschatology of the Bible. Okay, which there's some aspects that some people disagree on, but one thing that a lot of people agree on is going to be a hierarchy. Okay, many people know and understand that the children of Edom will be at the bottom of it. At the top of it will be Israel. That's okay. That's how the Most High set it up. But to act as if there's just going to be this area of a get out of captivity because of how you feel, it doesn't matter. Now, it doesn't mean that every single last person is going to be done the same way. No, some will be house servants, some will be overseers of the other people, some will be carrying burdens, some will be herding flocks, okay? Some will be basically masons building buildings. Some will be working on precious stones and refining them. Some will be working on iron and metal work, metallurgy, okay? So there's going to be various areas of where they're going to be. It's not a one size fit all, but at the end of the day, they're in subjugation to the elect. That's all we're trying to say. I don't know what the problem is with that. Okay. And if you ask me, that sounds like a good plan. That sounds like the reason why we seek after our everlasting salvation. All praises to the Most High. Okay? Yeah. That's what I say. It's directly or indirectly they took a bag. Okay. First of all, you're talking to Vocab Malone. Vocab Malone is literally an agent. This man has spent the better part of the last 12 years literally focusing his life on going around the whole world, going up against Israelite groups, going up against random brothers who believe that they're Israelites. This man has literally traveled the freaking 7 seas. He's gone to Europe, for crying out loud, to confront Israelite groups. He's gone to every city, in every major city, to confront directly Israelite groups. He's done documentaries. He's spoken on behalf, I think he was even chosen to speak to athletes in the NFL or the NBA to warn them about dealing with Israelite groups. And as you know, when you go into the actual hierarchy of the sports arena and who owns many of the teams, who are the commissioners, many of them are small hats, man. Okay. So that's the thing with these guys. Salvation is only for Israel. You have a problem with that because you don't know anything. You don't read your Bible. Let's see this. You need to, well, what you need to do, you need to go ahead and we're gonna put your comment up, we're gonna make you famous. Okay. When you go here, Matthew chapter 15, verse 22, and behold, a woman of Canaan came out to the same coast and cried unto him, saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, send her away, for she crieth after us. So they didn't even care about her. She a woman of Canaan, she a Canaanite, just like Hiram of Tyre. Okay. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. How come he didn't turn around and say, hey, since you believe that I can do this, why don't you sit down and worship me? Worship me, and I'm gonna save you. He just gave her a crumb and healed her daughter. And we're gonna see what he called her. Okay, we're gonna see what she called her, what her position was. So this is red letter. Okay. For you God talking about read the Bible. You don't read your Bible, clown. You don't read your Bible. You don't know this. Did you know this scripture? No, you didn't. Verse 25. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. And he answered and said, it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. Called her a dog. You know, in the ancient world and in the Middle East, that being called a dog is being a low form of animal. They don't even let dogs even live in their homes over there. They let them scavenge on roadkill. They give them scraps, food that they don't want to eat, food that's freaking old. They just throw it to the dogs. And he said, truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. She received herself as being a dog, not worthy to eat the food that come off the children's table. She got to let the crumbs fall off the ground. You ever had a dog and you're eating and you might be eating something and a little bit of food drops from your fork or your spoon? That dog been waiting for it to drop. As soon as you didn't even want to give it to him. You didn't even want to give it to your dog. It just got lucky, hit the ground, and you know the rule. You just let him eat it. That's what she says she is. She understood her position under the children's, which the children is the children of Israel. Okay. And particularly the elect, not all Israel. Okay. The elect of Israel. Okay. Then Yahushua answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it so done unto thee as thou wilt. And the daughter was made whole from that very hour. Now, y'all will sit here and be like, look, he says she had great faith and she believed he was capable of doing it because she heard he was doing it. It was her faith that he could do it. And on top of that, because of her saying, which that's in the other account. So she's a dog. He ain't coming there for her salvation. That's why if you go into the other scriptures, whenever a real Israelite came, he told them, you're getting salvation. Salvation has come to your house. You don't say that to no heathen. Okay? She's a dog. She's a dog. You don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. Royal Netics, you know nothing. Okay? You know nothing. Okay? You know nothing. You're just like them. Why don't you need to join all them other people? Because when Israelites, when the children of Israel went into captivity, it did not matter if you were righteous or wicked. They went into captivity. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they were thrown into the lion's den. Okay? Thrown into the fiery furnace to be taken out, only to be delivered. They had to have faith. Okay? They had to have faith in being delivered. A crumb falling from the master's table. See, you don't even understand the context. Dogs are going to be, our dogs are lower than your children. This is what you don't get. Some of you people think, because you're Babylonianized, you think a dog is equal to a child, just like a lot of Babylonians do. Just like people in Babylon, they called their dogs their children. Some of them will even say, this is my first son. They'll call their dog their son or their daughter. Because you think like a Babylonian, so you think it's the same thing. A dog is a lower level animal. A dog is below the children. A dog doesn't get to sit up at the table like a human being. A dog is on the ground. A dog waits for something to fall off the table because it wasn't meant for it. Okay? And see, this is the reason why people like Royal Netics and a lot of these Christians, the reason why they don't get it is because it's not meant for them to get it. Okay? It's not meant for them to get it. It's meant for them to be in a state of confusion, believing in this. This is the reason why I have this. Let me go back to my screen. Let me go back to the screen. This is what they believe in. Y'all believe in the United Nations. Y'all believe in the United Nations. The United Nations doctrine is exactly what y'all believe in. Y'all believe in the Otis Nolan Secorum. Y'all, that's y'all. That is Royal Netics. Royal Netics believes in this.
World order. New world order.
Okay? If you believe in all nations can be saved, you believe in the New World Order. Because that is a New World Order doctrine. That's why Esau went around the 7 seas telling everybody that they can be a Christian as long as they worship white Jesus and that all nations could be saved. And then you bring that into your belief system, and just like these guys remix it, that's why Hakah and Assad brought it out, because they're going to expand their money. Y'all going to be putting more money in their pocket. Okay? Y'all going to be bringing more money in their pocket. Okay? Y'all going to be bringing them so much money in their pocket, they're going to get 100 coins on y'all, and every time they get it, they're going to feel like they powering up like Mario. Every time the money drop, they got new life. That's going to be y'all giving it to them. Okay? You're not getting it. You're not getting it. I want you to keep posting because we need more people like you to keep posting, because y'all guys don't get it. We need more people like you to keep posting so we can keep exposing y'all's false doctrine. Y'all believe in the United Nations, which is a precursor to the New World Order. Y'all believe all nations can be saved. Y'all believe you just got to call on white Jesus and all y'all going to get salvation. And we're telling you that salvation is only for Israel. This the Hakkar and Assad, they just threw away Romans 9. Any Israelite that believes what they said, Romans 9 don't even pertain to them anymore. They can't even read Romans 9 the same way no more. Okay, because the service of God, the covenants pertain to them. And there's an order of everything. That's why the nations are worshiping idols along with the lost Israelites until the time that Yahushua shows up. And then the other nations will be forced to acknowledge and worship the one true God. But the problem is that they're going to still stray away, and that's going to allow the curses to come upon them. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and get something else as well. Let's share screen, and let's go into what was it at? Yeah, because the other nations are going to be forced to worship. So this is after Jerusalem, New Jerusalem, the elect of Israel, okay, takes over the earth. Okay. So let's go ahead and get this going real quick. Now, this guy, Royal Netics, does he know about this? Watch this. It says, all nations, you believe all nations are going to be saved, and they're all going to be all Gucci, and everything's going to be cool with them, right? Watch this. This is a future prophecy after the kingdom is set up. This is Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem. So the nations is going to go through a lot of destruction, and they're going to lose a lot of their people. But there's going to be a remnant of them that's left of all these biblical nations outside of the nation of Israel that was preserved, which is known as the elect. Okay? So it says that shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So see here, they're going to be worshiping the King, the Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So they're going to be forced. Mind you, remember, we just read in Isaiah 45, 11 through 17, that the other nations were worshiping idols. And they were going to be ashamed and confounded because they were worshiping the work of their own hands. But Israel was worshiping the God of heaven and earth. Okay, and therefore therefore Israel shall not be ashamed and confounded, world without end. So when the context of that happening, when salvation is finally given to Israel, okay, then the other nations are going to be required to worship the King, Yahweh, the Lord of hosts. They're going to have to worship his son. They're going to have to worship the ways of the Most High. And they're going to have to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, right? And look at this. And it shall come to pass that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So when Hakkar and Assad were talking about, oh, they're going to have their own lands and they're going to be able to bring tribute. Yes, they're going to have to till it because their tribute is a source of their labor. You don't just give something away without actually finding a way to either extract it or raise it or cultivate it. Okay? You don't give something that comes out of thin air. It has to be obtained some kind of way. So they're going to have land and they're going to have to grow their crops and take care of their flocks. But guess what? If they don't keep the ways in the kingdom, there's going to be no rain in their land. Now watch this. Verse 18. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that they have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen. Wait, how are they still called heathen if the kingdom is set up? There's supposed to be nothing but believers there. Why are they still called heathen? He will smite the heathen with not only no rain, but with plague, meaning diseases in the kingdom of heaven. He's going to smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay? So what are we talking about? Why is he punishing the other nations? Royal netics? Why is he punishing? Because everything he says, you're Gucci if you do this, but if you don't, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay? Yeah, and see, this is where Hakah got these guys. Okay? This is where Hakah got these guys because Hakah and Hassad. Okay? Hakah and Hassad got them without going into different precepts. Okay? In fact, let's get some of that. Let's get some of these precepts, because that's one of the things that they purposely left out because they didn't want you to know who the righteous in these other nations were. Okay? So watch this. This is what he understands. What a righteous person follows the ways of the Most High and acknowledges him, right? Now, this was actually prophesied, okay? And we're going to go ahead and get this real quick. This is prophesied in Deuteronomy 30, what would happen with the children of Israel. Okay? So this is how the righteous become restored. And this is how they're known to be righteous, because they're going to do this in the nations where they were scattered. So this guy, let's go ahead and pull up what this dude said, right? Watch this. So he goes into this dude's just spamming the chat, bro. You're just vomiting right now. But I'm gonna let you vomit because you're easy work. We'll do a cleanup on aisle 6 for you. Acts 10 and 35. But in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. So who are these people in every nation that would end up fearing him? Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, let's take a look. So as you go here to Deuteronomy chapter 30, this was a prophecy of what will happen. Mind you, they had not yet been kicked out of the land. They had not obtained the land, but they would eventually get kicked out of the land, right? So this is actually a forward prophecy that was given to them by Moses before they even got the land. So what was the prophecy? Deuteronomy chapter 30, starting at verse 1. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I've set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither the Lord thy God hath driven thee, and shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I commanded thee this day, thou and thy children with all thine heart and with all thy soul. Then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and return thee and gather thee from all the nations whither the Lord thy God hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost part of heaven, from thence will the Lord thy God gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. Now watch this. How we know it's not all nations? Look what he says. And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. So the people that will get this blessing, that are scattered among all nations, that turn to him and believe, all of them that return to him and call him to mind in all the nations, whether they were scattered, they're the ones that will be returned back into the land. Okay? So that's what it is. Hold on, somebody broke something real quick. I think they're playing around with. Give me a moment. Okay. Yeah, so here's part of the problem that they don't understand is that what is a Gentile? Makes it you're making this very easy. Okay? Making this very easy. So we have to define what a Gentile is. Now watch this. We just went into Deuteronomy 30 about the scattering, turning back to the Lord, being brought back after they acknowledge the Lord. Then they're going to come back they're going to be brought back to the land which was given to their fathers, and he'll multiply and increase them above their fathers. We know those are Israelites. Okay, now watch this. This is something that the likes of Royal Netics and other Christians and other people that believe all nations can be saved cannot understand. So when we go into 1 Corinthians chapter 10, starting at verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I will not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. So all of our fathers that were under the cloud under Moses were Israelites. Okay? They were Israelites. When you go into who the covenant was made to, the covenant was only made to Israel. Okay? Y'all, you got people out there trying to say it was given to the mixed multitude, but where was the land lot given to the mixed multitude? There was none. The mixed multitude were servants of the children of Israel in the wilderness. Okay? Now, when you go 2 chapters over, for all you Gentiles this, Gentiles that, watch this. 2 chapters later in the Corinthians, in the epistle, 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 2. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Now, how did that happen? How were their fathers going through under the cloud under Moses, and then how did they later become Gentiles carried about unto dumb idols? That's what a Gentile means in context. This is where when you go into Acts 13, 14, and 15, those that were in idolatry were Israelites that were worshiping idols. That's why they were called Gentiles. They were also known as the uncircumcised. And if this is the reason why Christians don't want to read about the book of Maccabees, which is the era leading into the time of Yahushua, because it'll show them that Israel was split into two different factions under the Greek Empire, where one portion of them went the way of the Greeks, started being uncircumcised, started going away from the customs. You could even look this up, and this is documented in secular history. You don't even got to go into the Bible. All you got to do is look up Hellenization of the Jews. There's whole vast secular resources about how the Jews, how a large portion of the Jews became Hellenized in the ancient world. So those people, those Jews that became Hellenized and started worshiping the idols of the Greeks, they stopped circumcising and started moving to other areas within the Greek Empire, like Ephesus, Corinth, Galatia, okay, Pontus, all these different areas that were Greek speaking, and they were basically keeping the ways of the heathen. And then there was a faction of those that were loyal, that were devout to the cause of the forefathers, okay, of the patriarchs. And there was a division among them because of that. So those people were considered persona non gratas, known as Gentiles, because why? They were carried about unto idols. But how is it that they were also told how our fathers went through the cloud under Moses? So these were Israelites that were returning back to the fold, who were formerly estranged. You can only be estranged if you were once familiar with your partner. That's why they have something called an estranged spouse. Y'all have become strange to one another when y'all foreknew one another. Now let's go ahead and go into Ephesians chapter 2. So we go into Ephesians chapter 2. We'll start at verse 11. Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh. Wait, I thought they were always Gentiles. How come they are no longer Gentiles? This is not talking about the other nations. It's talking about their behavior. Why were they called Gentiles? Who were called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. Why were they called uncircumcised? Because they were not circumcised in themselves. Okay. In fact, let me go ahead and get this account, because these Christians, they don't even know, they don't understand this. Okay. In fact, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to ChatGPT. Watch this. Watch. Watch this. These guys. Let me go ahead and get this real quick. Okay. Watch this. Let me actually go ahead and refresh this real quick. Hold on, let me get this. Antiochus. What was Antiochus Antiochus? And y'all see when I put the results up of the answer. Epiphanes policy of Hellenization of the Jews. Got to spell check this real quick. Okay, and then I'm going to ask him. And let me see if they put, what about his policy on circumcision of Jews? Now watch this. See, I'm going to give you a history lesson to a Christian. This is what Christians don't understand. So let me do this. So as you see here, get asked a couple of questions to these people. ChatGPT, which is not always, you have to ask it the right way for them to get their information. So I had to hone it down to a particular person because he was the one that instituted it. Okay. So the question was, what was Antiochus IV Epiphanes' policy of Hellenization of the Jews? Antiochus IV, now look at the time frame too. I like that they put the time frame. Antiochus IV Epiphanes' policy of Hellenization towards the Jews was one of the most extreme attempts in ancient history to erase a people's religious identity and replace it with Greek culture and religion. It directly led to the Maccabean revolt from 167 to 160 BCE. So basically about 160 years before the Messiah was born, Hellenization was very extreme upon the Jews. Okay? So let's go ahead and go into the different bullet points. What Hellenization meant. Hellenization, forcing Greek culture, language, religion, and social customs onto a population. In most regions, Greek culture spread gradually and peacefully after Alexander the Great. But among Jews who had strict laws that conflicted with Greek norms, Hellenization generated tension. Antiochus IV took it far beyond cultural influence. He attempted cultural genocide. Now look at this. Why Antiochus IV targeted the Jews? Antiochus was aggressively pro-Greek, losing control of the eastern part of his empire, trying to unify his kingdom under one religion and culture, influenced by internal Jewish factions fighting for power, Hellenizers versus traditionalists. So among the Jews during that 2nd century BC, there was two factions, one that wanted to be Hellenized and one that wanted to stay to the traditional roles. This is what a guy like Royal Netix doesn't understand about the history of why there were Greek-speaking Jews. He doesn't understand why Paul spoke Greek, why Paul was born outside of the land of Israel, why he was known as Paul of Tarsus and not Paul of Jerusalem. But why was Paul also a Jew and a Benjamite? He wouldn't understand that because of men like Royal Netix does not know history. So when he talks about what Paul was talking about, you don't know what Paul was talking about. You don't know why that in some of these same cities, you had synagogues in these same cities that were in the Greek-speaking world. He has no idea, just like many Christians, because they want to believe that when they read about in the New Testament, they read the book of Acts, they want to believe that the people that were believing were actual non-Israelites because they don't know the history. Okay? This is the reason why one of the things that was said to this right here, he wouldn't even understand this. Guys like Royal Netix, who are making an example of, he wouldn't even understand this right here. Okay, watch this. This is John chapter 7 and verse 33. Then said Yahushua unto them, yet a little while I am with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. Ye shall seek me, and shall not find me, and where I am, thither ye cannot come. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go, that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? So that word there for disperse. Now, this is what the Jews, this is the people in Israel saying, will he go into the dispersed? Who's the dispersed? Let's go into that. The word there is diaspora. In fact, that's the word in the Greek, is diaspora. Okay. A diaspora, a scattering, a dispersion of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations, of Christians scattered abroad among the Gentiles. Well, guess what? The people that they were referring to that he was going to go to, they weren't Christians at the time. So who were they? They were Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. This is the reason why when you read chapters like the book of Acts, you'll see, watch this. Paul goes to Athens. Okay. So in Athens, peep this. Acts chapter 17 and verse 16. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw that the city wholly given to idolatry. Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews and with the devout persons in the market daily with them that met with him. So why was there a synagogue of Jews in Athens if there weren't a scattered people already over there? Now, what do you think would happen over the course of hundreds of years where a group of people are being scattered, forced out of their land, both economically, politically, okay, or even being forced because the sword of the other nations is chasing them down, and they will move to these other parts of the Roman Empire, which include Athens. And then when they go there, over a course of generations, some of them are going to fall away. Some of them are not going to hold dear to the ways of the fathers. When you go into the book of the Old Testament, you go into the book of Judges, and you go through the book of Kings and Chronicles, what you'll notice is that even though Israelites were in the land, you'll notice that a lot of them kept going into idolatry, worshiping the gods of the nations that were around them. But there was always a subset of them that were still holding dear. So same thing happens in scattering. When the Israelites got scattered and they end up in these other lands like Ephesus, Athens, Corinth, there would be a section of them that would still be devout, going to the synagogues. And then when the high holy days come, they will go to Jerusalem, just like you saw in Acts chapter 2, of the devout Jews under every nation under heaven. But then there will be a faction of them that would fall away. And they would fall away into idolatry and to philosophy, which is what was happening. So what happened is when you go here, you notice that in verse 18, Paul leaves the synagogue, and then he sees the people that are into philosophy. Then certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics encountered him and said, what will this babbler say? Others some. He seemeth to be set forth of strange gods, because he preaches unto them Yahushua and the resurrection. So they were like, this guy is here, and he keeps talking about this guy Yahushua and the resurrection. He got this strange doctrine or philosophy. So these were the two factions that happened, that occurred. Let's go back right here. Okay. We're going to go back here to this tab. Now, mind you, Acts 17 takes place in the 1st century AD. This Antiochus happened about 200 years prior. Now, remember this 4th bullet point. It caused an internal faction fighting for power, Hellenizers versus traditionalists. So these people, going back to Acts 17, the people in verse 17 would be the traditionalists, those that were the synagogue, the Jews that were going to the synagogue in Athens, and then there were those that were into the Hellenization. So they were still in that division. Those that were into philosophy, that were into Epicurean, being Stoics. So that was the two different factions. That faction started to exist of those that were into philosophy, into idolatry, worshiping gods of the Greeks, of the nations around them, and there were those that were still holding true to the customs, which are known as traditionalists. This is what you Christians don't even understand. Okay? You don't understand that. Okay? So again, traditionalists versus Hellenizers. Okay? And those Hellenizers would be called Gentiles. They would not be doing circumcision. They would not be following the law and the prophets. They would not be reading the Bible or the Torah and the Tanakh. They'd be reading Greek philosophy. They'd be reading about being an Epicurean, about being a Stoic. That's what they would be following. And there were those that would be following the ways of the fathers. Okay? So he said he concluded that Jewish laws made them backwards and disloyal. This is what Antiochus thought. And so he tried to eliminate Judaism itself. The core of his policy destroyed Judaism, okay, replaced it with Greek religion. And according to First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, Josephus, and contemporary scholarship, which is what I call this secular scholarship, and Antiochus' decrees issued around 167 BC. Now let's see what he outlawed. Outlawing core to Jewish practices. Antiochus banned circumcision. Antiochus banned circumcision, bruh. You see that? That's who the uncircumcised were. You don't get it because you don't understand timelines. For you, those people don't matter to you. Those Israelites that ended up going into idolatry, stopping circumcision, going into worshiping Greek idols like Diana and Olympus and Mars and Apollo and Zeus. To you, that doesn't matter to you. You don't care. But God cares. The Most High, the God of Israel. Again, I'm stressing this. The God of Israel cares. That's why he sent forth his son to be a sacrifice for their sin, to bring them back to the fold, because they were estranged from him through their idolatry. You don't even, you and that's why y'all Christians, y'all quote the wrong stuff, the stuff that actually destroys you. The wild olive tree were those that were broken off because they went wild. That's why they're known as wild. They're no longer going the right way. That's why they were broken off. Okay? In fact, let me get a precept for that. This is Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse 21. Yet I have planted thee a noble vine, holy and right seed. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? Okay? They became a strange vine. Yeah. Let me see if I can get more of this chat GPT answer. So not only did Antiochus ban circumcision, but he also banned Sabbath observances, kosher dietary laws. This is why they were eating swine in the temple. You can go into that in the book of Maccabees. This is also confirmed by secular scholars because it was documented by historians during that time that were not even believing Jews, or they were not even Israelites. Temple sacrifices according to the Torah, those were banned. Feasts and festivals such as Passover, okay, Feast of Tabernacles, all that stuff was banned. Okay, now what were the penalties? Penalties were death. So if your kid, do you know, you can look it up. If your son, if they found out that you circumcised your son, they took out your son. Look at this. Mothers who circumcised their sons were killed and their infants were hung around their necks. Okay. These are the same people this guy, Royal Netics, wants to save. The same people that were doing this, killing infant babies because they were circumcised, killing their mothers. This is what the other nations were doing to the devout Israelites of that time, forcing offerings to Greek gods. He mandated sacrifices to Zeus Olympius, Greek god, and other Greek deities. Animals unclean to Jews like pig were also forced on the altar. That's why guys like Royal Netics, they eat swine. You got to be, are you a swine eater? Because a lot of y'all that believe this stuff, a lot of y'all also swine eaters as well. Royal Netics, are you a swine eater? Okay. And if you say I want to see what you say about unclean food. You see, this is what he thinks. He says the natural branches are the 12 tribes. What happens with an Israelite when they become Hellenized? Are they still a natural branch? Because a natural branch acts according to the nature that was expected of it, which is to worship the Most High and keep His ways. What happens with an Israelite, Royal Netics, when an Israelite starts to worship Olympius, when he starts to eat swine, when he starts circumcising his sons? You're not getting it. Yeah, well, it wouldn't matter if you're an Israelite if you believe all nations can be saved. What is your whole point of you saying you're an Israelite if you believe other nations can be saved? It shouldn't matter. Once someone says that other nations can be saved, you being an Israelite no longer matters. It no longer matters. It's of no benefit to you to be an Israelite because you are no longer the only person that can get salvation. Well, what happens is if they go off and they go into idolatry, then they get cast away. They get taken off. Now they can only be grafted back in if they have faith and believe. Do you even understand how grafting works? Do you understand the science behind grafting? You can't graft. You have to graft to the same type of plant. Okay. Okay. So they even burn scrolls. So a lot of people, anyone who possessed, I'm going to go down here to E, burning Torah scrolls. He ordered that Torah scrolls be burned. Anyone possessing scriptures be executed. This was a direct attempt to erase Jewish memory. This is the reason why so many people went into being Greeks. And it happened over the course of generations. It doesn't take long to erase a people's identity through scattering and through giving them another identity, just like a lot of our people consider themselves Americans and don't consider themselves Israelites no more because they don't even remember. Their parents don't know who they are. Their grandparents don't know who they are. Their great-parents don't know who they are. They lost their identity over time. They were given a new one by their oppressors. The same ones that y'all want to save. Y'all saying, let me tell you this. I'm going to tell you this, Royalnetics. This is what you need to do. Royalnetics, what you need to do is find out the plantation that your forefathers were freed on in 1865. And you need to go and tell the people that owned your forefathers and enslave them. You need to go and tell them about the gospel and get them into the kingdom. Tell them that you forgive them and that they are the wild branches, but they could be brought into the natural branch. They could be brought back in. Give them that Romans 11 and tell them that even though they enslaved your ancestors and you're part of the natural branch and they're part of the wild branches, that they can get the same thing as you, such as salvation. Because that's what y'all need to do. Y'all need to do that. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull up something real quick. Hold on. It made me think of something. Watch this. Hold on. See if I can find it. This is y'all right here. This is what you need to do, bro. I got something for you. This is LaDainian Tomlinson at his Hall of Fame speech. LaDainian Tomlinson is super proud of his slave owner's last name. Okay, watch this.
170 years ago, George was brought here in chains on a slave ship from West Africa. His last name, Tomlinson, was given to him by the man who owned him. Tomlinson was the slave owner's last name. My name began with the man who owned my great-great-great-grandfather. Now it's proudly carried by me, my children, my extended family. People stop me on the street because they know me as LT, the football player. But after football, people have begun to recognize me as LaDainian Tomlinson. Not simply for what I did as a football player, but for who I am as a man. I firmly believe that God chose me to help bring two races together under one last name, Tomlinson. I'm of mixed race, and I represent America. Man, sit your dumb ass down and shut up. You don't know, man. You don't know.
Yeah, that's you, man. That's you, Royalnetics. Y'all, you gonna bring the white family is the wild olive branch, and the black family is the natural branch. That's you. That's you. Bring them together, my guy. That is the wild, and that's Romans 11, right? Huh? Nah, bro. Go back into the plantation and bring the wild branch slave owners into the fold, my guy. Make it happen, Captain. Make it happen, Captain. Yeah. Make it happen, Captain. No, we hate the oppressor. The Bible clearly speaks against the oppressor. I'm telling you to go back and get your oppressor and put them both in the tree. Bring the olive tree, my guy. Bring the olive tree. Like LaDainian Thomas said, that he done united two families together, the natural branches and the wild branches that were broken off. So go ahead and bring them together, Royalnetics. No, it comes through belief in Yahushua. Salvation comes through belief in Yahushua, but guess what? Yahushua is going to free those that believe in him from the hand of the oppressor. That's part of the problem that you don't know, but you're too busy trying to bring him in under one banner, talking about they're the wild branches that were broken off, talking about the other nations. That's what you said. I'm not putting words in your mouth. You're the one who said it. Let me go ahead and bring up what you said. This is what you said. The wild olive tree are the Gentile nations. Was it not a Gentile nation that had our people in captivity? What race of the people were they? You said it. I'm not twisting your word. Your words is your words. The wild olive tree are the Gentile nations. I told you that they were Israelites that had went off and stopped following the ways of the Most High. That's why they were cast away. But they could be brought back through faith in Yahushua, which is what Paul was doing as part of his ministry, to go and bring them back. Okay? We're not twisting anything. You need to pull a Damian Thomason and go get the wild olive tree to be grafted in with the natural. That's what we telling you. Go first. If you want to put your doctrine where your typing is, you need to go and find that plantation, find out that family that owned your ancestors, and bring them both together under faith in Yahushua. Start there first. Don't just make it a freaking theory or philosophy. Make it a reality. See, we're making a lesson out of you. There's no twisting. You're twisting. Yeah, and they're going to get punished for what they did. That's the thing you're not getting. Huh? That's the thing you're not getting, Royal Netics. Let's get this real quick. This is Isaiah 14:1. For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids. And they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. What you think about that? What you think about that? Of course, Israelites were being judged when they went into captivity. Everywhere where Israelites were scattered to was judgment, because if we were not if we were not in the land and we were scattered away from our holy land, that is part of our judgment. And it doesn't matter what generation comes in after that. If you're born into captivity, that's part of the judgment that you're facing on the behalf of your forefathers messing up. That's what that whole curses and blessings was about. But Yahushua was made a curse for our sake that we may be free. That's why we have to turn back to him to be delivered. Point blank. And that deliverance is not for the other nations. This is what you guys don't get. A lot of you guys, you get on here and you start talking, but you don't even understand what it is thou speakest or thou typest. Okay. This is Jeremiah chapter 23 and 5. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. Not just in the land of Israel, in the earth. This righteous branch that was raised up unto David is Yahushua HaMashiach, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. In his days, Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely. Where are the other nations named in this, Royal Netics? When you got the likes of Akkad and Hassad telling you that the other nations are going to be saved, this is not what the Bible is saying. The Bible is saying this. We're not twisting of the Most High's words right here. And this is his name whereby he shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that there shall no more say, the Lord liveth, which brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. But the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country, and from all countries whither I have driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. Okay. And see, he just got cut because Jeremiah 23 clearly said that will be saved and dwell safely is going to be Judah and Israel. It didn't say the other nations. We already went to the scriptures that the other nations will be serving. Okay, they'll be serving. How are you saved if you're going to have burdens placed upon you? You're going to be servants and handmaids. You're not making any sense. If Jeremiah chapter 23 and 7 was already fulfilled, why are people still talking about the old Exodus? When is the new Exodus that people are talking about? Because the new Exodus, according to Deuteronomy 23 and 7, is going to eclipse the old Exodus. So again, you don't know what you're talking about. Exactly. Non-Israelites can't be saved. Let's get something real quick that these guys miss. And this is the reason why Akkad and Hassad of Genesis Israelites, they're doing it for money because they're trying to expand. They're trying to triple, quadruple the amount of money that they make off of streaming by expanding themselves into the Christian circles. Okay? That's why they're doing it. It's for money. They want to be big, like get bigger, like Truth Unedited, who has the same exact doctrine. And they can basically tether themselves over to the Christian community and get more of those people that's going to be like into their doctrine and tell them how they're going to have a great life under the Israelites. That's why a lot of white Christians, the ones that follow the likes of John Hagee and a lot of these Christian pastors over here, a lot of your right-wing Christian conservatives, that's the reason why they have blind loyalty to the small hats, because they believe that they're the people that they got to bless to be blessed back, not realizing that they're in a trick bag. But, that's for their own fall anyway, because they're the people that hated the Lord's people anyway. So they're going to fall in that. And then some of y'all that were Christians, y'all believe that too. Okay? So we're going to go into the chief apostle, Peter. We're going to go to his epistle. Although he had two epistles, they were very, very powerful. And it kind of summarized what it is that we need to know about salvation. Okay? Let me go ahead and start at verse 6. So this is 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 6. Wherein ye greatly rejoice, though now for a season, if need be, ye are in heaviness through manifold temptations, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Yahushua Mashiach, whom having not seen ye love, in whom though now ye see him not, yet believing ye rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Okay? So the salvation is a salvation of your soul. The other nations is not getting that. The other nations is not getting that. How are you getting salvation and you're serving another human, another person, another nation of people on the earth? You're bearing burdens. You're paying tribute. Tribute is part of your labor. There's not, your tribute that you're giving to the Israelites in the kingdom is not going to come out of nothing. You got to work for it. You're going to have to go into mines and dig it up and refine the gold bars and the silver bars, and you have to bring it. The flocks, the herbs, the vegetables, the fruits. You got to cultivate them, pick them in their seasons and bring them. You're bringing your labor to a people to serve their benefit. I don't get what you're saying about salvation. That's why this guy, Hakan and Assad, how are you telling these people that they're going to get salvation, yet they still got to serve? That don't make no sense. Exactly. They can't differentiate between servitude and salvation. These guys is crazy. If I tell you I'm giving you bars of gold and silver, and I'm giving you flocks, and I'm giving you vegetables, you think I got that for the free? You think it came up out of thin air? Like abracadabra? Come on now. That's very simple, Royanetics, and we're gonna show you what this is. Okay, so you said, and there came much people unto him, whereof some were glad, some were sorry, and some of them were bound, and some bare gifts, because that's the rest of it, right? So here's the sum of them that were glad and some that were sorry. Okay, let's deal with the some that were glad and that some that were sorry. Okay, this is, I'm going to go to Daniel chapter 12. So this is in the end when the deliverance occurs. Daniel chapter 12 and 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. Who are the children of Daniel's people? The children of Daniel's people are the Israelites, not the other nations. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, thy people, the Israelites, shall be delivered. But specifically, everyone that shall be found written in the book. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting shame and contempt. So those that have everlasting life, they're going to be glad. Those that have shame and contempt, they're going to be sad. Now we're going to go back to Psalm 149. Who are those that were bound? Because we didn't even get to verse 8. We're going to start at verse 7. To execute vengeance upon the heathen. This is what the saints is going to do, by the way, starting at verse 5, let the saints be joyful. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Let the high praise of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people. Some of those that are going to be sad are going to be executed. Okay. And it's very simple to understand this. Okay. Because some were glad, some were sorry. How come the sorry ones weren't bound? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about that? I'm going to show you why they're going to be sad. Okay. Because some of them weren't doing the work. Okay. They were bad servants. So I'm going to go and I'm not going to go into the whole parable, but we'll go into this right here. We'll just go down to, you can read it in Luke 19, but I'm going to start at verse 22 for the sake of time. And he said unto him, out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. Wherefore then gavest thou my money into the bank, that at my coming, because remember, he's going to be there, he's going to show up, because it's a parable about him going away and giving talents to his servants to go and make money by trading. And one hid it, didn't do what he was supposed to do with it. Okay. And he said unto them that stood by, take from him that hath a pound, and give it unto him that had 10 pounds. And they said unto him, Lord, he had 10 pounds. He said, for I say unto you that unto everyone which hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath, shall be taken away from him. But those mine enemies that would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. Who do you think those people were? Those are the people that rejected him during his time that was on earth, and they're going to reject him when they're told about him. So when they hear about Yahushua and the gospel and they're told, they're going to say, we don't need him. Old Testament only Israelites, those that want to follow other doctrines, Islam, those who want to be in Egyptology, Nawubian, those who want that say the black woman is God, those that say they're atheists, those that say they're agnostics, those that are not into the way of the Heavenly Father. That's why they're going to be sorry, because their time's up. Those that are glad are going to be the good and faithful servants. Those that are bound, okay, going back, is going to be this: to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron, to execute upon them the judgment written, dishonor have all the saints, praise ye the Lord. So those that were bound are going to include the kings and the nobles of the earth and their people, which we brought in Isaiah 45. Okay, because we got other nations being bound as well. I already brought this out earlier. We'll start at verse right here. We'll start at verse 13, Isaiah 45 and 13. I've raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He shall build my city, and he shall let go my captives. Who are the captives? The Israelites. We read that, Isaiah chapter 14, verses 1 and 2. Not for a price, no reward. And we know they're going to be delivered, right? According to Jeremiah chapter 23, verses 5 through 7. Okay? They're going to be delivered. Saith the Lord of hosts. Thus saith the Lord, the labor of Egypt and the merchandise of Ethiopia and the Sabians, and men of stature shall come over unto thee, and they shall be thine. They shall come after thee. In chains they shall come over, in chains. And they shall fall down unto thee, and they shall make supplication unto thee, saying, surely God is in thee. Okay? So they came bound. And then the bearing gifts, you could think about the wise men of the East, the ones that knew that the Messiah of Israel was coming, were the wise men that came bearing gifts, frankincense and myrrh to the child that came into the world. So there's going to be a few of those that are going to know what's happening, what's coming up next. Yeah, they're come bearing gifts. That don't mean they're not going to serve. After all, the gifts that they gained, they had to earn it some way. They didn't come out of the ground. See, kingdoms operate just like all kingdoms. The difference is that this is going to be more vast. As ruthless as Esau Edom was, he still made friends with certain people among the people that he ruled over, but they still had to come through and pay tribute. They still had to do his bidding. They still had to cut deals that were more advantageous to him. That's how rulership works. You just spamming all over the place. You're spamming all over the place. Okay? When you go to Acts 11, Acts 11 tells you that the reason why Cornelius was called a Gentile is because he wasn't circumcised. That's when Peter knew that the Holy Spirit can follow them that were uncircumcised. You don't get it. See, that's why y'all not understanding. You're coming with the same doctrine. And I already went into the history about how Jews were uncircumcised and were scattered into these other parts of the Greek-speaking world. I showed you had Jews all the way in Athens. You can look up the history that there was Jews in Corinth, there was Jews in Rome. Okay? There was Jews in Corinth, there was Jews in Rome. In fact, let's get something real quick. I gotta. Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, people that were still keeping the way of the Jews and those that were keeping the way of the Greeks. Okay, and like I said, you're being purposely intellectually obtuse right now. That I done showed you some stuff already. This is Acts chapter 14. And it came to pass in Iconium, not Jerusalem, on Iconium, that they went both together into the synagogue of the Jews, and so spake that a great multitude of both the Jews and also of the Greeks believed. Okay, now these that were Greeks were those that were keeping the ways of the Greeks. They were Hellenized. They were Hellenistas. Okay. Now you see that? Hellene. Okay. A Greek-speaking person is a Hellenist. And the inhabitants of Hellas, or Greek, was a Hellenist. And also those that worshipped. The primary difference is in religion and worship. Now, I'm going to show you something. I'm actually do this. Hold up. Watch this. Because this guy doesn't understand what the difference between a Jew and a Greek is. Let's get into trying to find this definition, because this guy don't understand this. Okay, so when you go to Iconium, Iconium is not in Israel. This is what a lot of people don't understand. You got to know history. Okay, why were there Jews in Iconium? Okay, let me go ahead and make sure I get this map real quick. Let me see if I view image. There it is. View image. Share this tab. Okay, you see here, this is Iconium. This is not the land of Israel. This is known as Asia Minor. Asia Minor, this whole area was Greek speaking. Okay, this is Colossae. This is where the church of Colossians was at. Okay, when you read the book of Acts, these are the areas that Paul was going to. It goes into his journey in and out of Jerusalem, going down. This is where he's from. He's from Tarshish. He was born and raised here. Okay, in the province of Cilicia. This is Lystra. This is Iconium. That's why there were Jews there. Okay, this is Athens. Remember, we read there in Acts 17. There were Jews in Athens. They had synagogues there. All these places had synagogues. Why did all these places have synagogues? And then why did they also have people that were also worshiping idols, that were holding on to Greek philosophy? See, this is where a lot of people, you don't understand. When you look at cities like Detroit, Detroit is like over 80% black. How did that happen? Our people migrated to those cities. At one point, New Orleans was about 75, 80% black. Same thing with Washington, D.C. Okay? There's cities and areas where we would congregate as a people, but when we would go there, because there was a history of Hellenization, which we already went into, there was a faction, a division among those that were into the ways of the Greeks, and they were called Greeks, and those that were called Jews. And the difference was in what they worshiped. Okay? Now let's go ahead and get this real quick, because this is the wool that Hassad and Akkad pulling over your eyes and making you believe that the people that Paul was preaching to, that they were non-Israelites. So when you go into this is Merriam-Webster's Dictionary of a Hellenist, a person living in the Hellenistic times who was Greek in language, outlook, and way of life, but was not Greek in ancestry, but they were called Greeks. It's just like today you would call Kylian Mbappe of France a Frenchman. Okay, because he speaks French and he eats croissants. Okay. That's why they were called Greeks. Now watch this. I'm gonna teach you something. This is Kylian Mbappe, who's considered one of the best players on the planet in soccer, as Americans call it. In the world, they call it football. Now look at this. Kylian Mbappe Lotin is a French professional footballer. Why is he called French? Well, let's see. One, he was born in Paris. Okay, so look, he was born in Paris. He also plays for France's national team. He speaks French. He eats French food. He dresses in French designer clothing. He even played for Paris Saint-Germain, which is their local football team. Yet he is called a French professional footballer. So when they call people Greeks in the Bible, is because of what their custom was, what they spoke language-wise, how they lived, and how they identified themselves. Now watch this. I asked a question on Microsoft Bing search engine. Is Kylian Mbappe French? Yes. Kylian Mbappe is French. You see how that works? Let's go back to this. So a Hellenist is a person who's Greek in language, outlook, and way of life, meaning that they're going to hold to the Epicureans and the Stoic doctrine, Greek philosophy, worship Greek idols, take Greek language, wear togas, all that. But especially a Hellenized Jew. So a Hellenized Jew is known as a Hellenist. That means Greek in English, by the way. Okay? So when you're reading the New Testament, you're reading the book of Acts, understand this: a Hellenist is especially a Hellenized Jew, because they were the most Hellenized people. They were the people that were targeted for Hellenization more than any other people in the Greek Empire. But you wouldn't know that because guys like Hakan and Assad are going to hide that history from you. Okay? Watch this. So let's see. Hold on. I got this real quick. Let's go back to let me go back to where we were at. So let's go back to that Iconium, right? So that's who the Greeks were, man. The Jews were the ones that were keeping the way of the Jews. The Greeks were keeping the way of the Greeks. That's why they were called Gentiles and uncircumcised. So when you go into verse 2, it says, but the believing Jews, the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles, which were the ones that were Greeks, meaning Greeks by way of life, the Hellenistic Jew, the Hellenized, and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. Remember, we already went into 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, showing you that what a Gentile is one that's carried out about unto idols. But you notice that both times in both of those epistles, Paul told them you were Gentiles, meaning they were no longer Gentiles because they were no longer in idolatry. It's very plain and simple. We got to simplify things and not allow this kind of confusion. That's why one of the most important things to do is to identify. If you don't identify things, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a misidentification, which is going to lead to the false doctrine of the likes of what these men are pushing, which they're doing it for the money. That's what y'all not getting. They're doing it for the money because there's more money in expanding your audience than there is limiting it with the straight gate. They can double, triple, quadruple the amount of money that they're going to make over the next 12 months and going forward by adding in people telling them, hey, it's okay for you to believe as well, which again, go through our channel. We've talked about how scattered Israelites have been scattered so long that there's not going to be a specific look type. So we're faith-based. That's why we preach a specific message in terms of salvation. So that way, those that have faith in the message and believe can follow. We're not doing a hair texture test or a paper bag test to determine whether or not you are an Israelite. We're doing a faith test, and you're failing at this, Royal Netics. You're failing miserably because all the stuff I'm bringing to you is objectively facts. Watch this. You're gonna make this a very good lesson. We're using you as the punching bag right now, Royanetics. We're using you as a punching bag. Now watch this. Let me get to where you said this statement. Now he says this: Italian is from Italy, a Roman, not a Jew centurion, an officer in the Roman army that makes him a Gentile by blood. Jews were in the military. There were all nations of people groups were in the Roman military. I don't think you understand that. Now you think because he was called that he was from Italy, that made him a non-descendant of Israel. Now watch this. I asked Microsoft Bing, is Mario Balotelli Italian? Yes, Mario Balotelli is Italian. He was born in Palermo, Sicily. Mario Balotelli was a striker for Italy. Okay. He's Italian. Just like Cornelius, right? Or are you going to say he isn't Italian? Because a lot of y'all don't even understand that. You think that people in their actual biblical nationality was tied to where they were born. We already know that Paul was an Israelite and he wasn't even born in Israel. He was from Tarshish. That's what y'all don't get. You're thinking like a Christian. You're really thinking like a Christian. Okay. And when you look into the history of the way Israelites did excommunication, when you went into idolatry, you were no longer considered part of the nation. That's what Hosea chapter 1 was about. Okay. Hosea chapter 1 is about being no longer part of the nation, no longer his people because of going off. So any of those people that went off and their children that never returned back to the ways of the Lord, they were considered no longer his people. Therefore, they were considered another, as if they were another nation, not his people. Watch this. Watch this. I'm going to show you something in the book of Acts. Let me actually see if I can find so let's go to Acts chapter 11. All right, so after Cornelius was baptized, we're going to Acts chapter 11 for Peter to make the report to Jerusalem. Let's see what made Cornelius different than the other people that they were preaching to prior to Acts chapter 10. Okay, so we start at verse 1. It says, and the apostles and brethren that were in Judea heard that the Gentiles had also received the word of God. And when Peter, this is the diaspora, by the way, and that he's referring to the ones in Acts, the ones in that were talking about in John chapter 7 and verse 35, the dispersed among the Gentiles, the diaspora, which is the scattered Israelites. Okay, plain and simple, right? But watch this. And when Peter was coming to Jerusalem, they that were of the circumcision contended with them, saying they went to men uncircumcised and did eat with them. So the two nations is one that's of the circumcision and one that's of the uncircumcision. They're treated as two different ethnic groups. You're in the law, you're not to, if you're not circumcised in your flesh, the way the law was set up, those people were considered cut away from the rest of the people. Therefore, they were no longer part of the nation. They were considered uncircumcised and treated as heathen. Okay? Let me see if we could get this real quick. Mm-mm-mm. Let me see if we can keep this. So when you go into the scriptures, the descendants of Abraham were supposed to be circumcised. And then also, whenever you have a male servant born in your house, you would also circumcise the males. Okay? Because you're underneath the authority of the nation. Okay? When you go into how it was done, this is the reason why I had to bring up the Hellenization under Antiochus Epiphanes. It became illegal to do it, but everybody didn't follow that. That's why the Maccabees, starting with Judas Maccabees, them and the people that were with them fought against the Greeks to keep the custom so they can continue circumcising their children. But those that didn't, they were rejected and treated as another nation. That's why they were known as the uncircumcision. And because of the tension, because of the amount of death that led to that situation, because there was a faction of Israelites that betrayed their own brethren and sided with Antiochus and killed those that were faithful and sided with the heathen against them, there was tension from that point on. That was the tension between the two sides. So any of their descendants, they were rejected unless they became proselytes, and then they were forced to be circumcised. That's why when you read Acts 15, the first people that was trying to get them circumcised according to the law of Moses were those that came out of the sect of the Pharisees. The Pharisees, the people that were formerly Pharisees that had believed in Yahushua in Acts 15, they were the ones that were pushing for them to be circumcised. But that's a whole nother story. And this is something that unfortunately we don't have time to kind of get into. Okay? Yeah, if you were uncircumcised, you were no longer part of the nation. You were cut off. All other nations were uncircumcised. That covenant was a covenant that was specifically given to Abraham. Now, some of Abraham's seed, like the continued it probably, Ishmael, because Ishmael was circumcised. Remember, Ishmael was born before Isaac. Okay. But uncircumcised means one that's a heathen. If you're uncircumcised, you're already not part of the covenant back then. You see, this is what you do, Rolanetics. Guys like you, the reason why you're confused, you do not want to acknowledge the Israelites that went into idolatry that stopped circumcising. You do not know what to even deal with them, so you keep bringing up the other nations. How about those that were uncircumcised Jews, those that were worshiping idols? In fact, one of the Greek philosophers, he actually wrote a whole thing about how he met a Jew that was Hellenized. Actually, which Greek philosopher wrote about a Hellenized Jew? Now, there's actually another one. It was like one of the ancient ones. But they brought out this Philo of Alexander, the Greek philosopher who wrote about a Hellenized Jew, is Philo of Alexandria. He was a Hellenistic Jewish philosopher who lived in Alexandria and synchronized and synthesized Greek philosophy with Jewish traditions. So he was a Hellenistic. He was into Greek philosophy, and he was a Jew. Okay. Now this is a modern drawing. This is not how he looked like. In fact, we got an actual lesson we did. It's on the icon series. If you go to the icon playlist, we actually show you the actual archaeologist showing you a depiction of a head of a Jew that lived in ancient Alexandria. Okay. And the dude looked like LaDainian Thomason. I kid you not. Yeah. So yeah, guys like Royalnetics, they spam the chat because they don't understand anything. What made them unclean is that they were uncircumcised, but faith cleaned them. Their faith justified them in the way that the law couldn't. That's why Cornelius and the men that were with him were accepted, because they were among the people that were uncircumcised, going back to the time. There were descendants of those that were going back to the time of Antiochus, which was about 200 years prior to that encounter with Peter. But you're not understanding that. Okay. Let me get this real quick. Let me get something else. I had to think about this too. I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I gotta get this also. That's why when y'all read the Bible, again, every time they step outside of Jerusalem and they're talking to people, if they're outside of the Holy Land, if they're outside of Galilee or outside of Judea or outside of Jerusalem, y'all automatically just think, oh, there's no way. Like y'all have this idea that a nation of people's identity is tied to a particular geographical line. Y'all don't. It's hard for you to even know that there's Jews in these other places. Huh? Sometimes I wonder if you people even read, because you make yourself look very, very foolish and very ignorant. Okay, when you start running your mouth. Now watch this. Since you want to talk about Italy with Cornelius, this is Acts chapter 18. After these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately came from Italy with his wife, a Jew that came from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. So there was Jews in Rome. There were Jews in Rome, my guy. Aquila and Priscilla were in Italy. So you saying that Cornelius cannot be an Israelite because you assume that everybody that's in Italy is not a descendant of Jacob, whether they were keeping the ways of their forefathers or they were into idolatry and not circumcising. You're taking away the reality of how these places were. They were not just full of quote unquote Italians. Just because you're from Italy doesn't mean that you're an ethnic Italian. Okay? You could speak English and not be an Englishman. You could speak Chinese and not be a Chinese man. Okay? Well, exactly. So if Jews are all over the earth, why can't Cornelius be a descendant of one of those Jews who was uncircumcised? Okay, which is what was talked about in Acts 11. Acts 11 goes into the fact that the reason why it was a shock when Peter went to them because they were uncircumcised. You still have not answered the question of how do you think uncircumcised Jews were treated? How do you think Jews that were in idolatry were treated? You're not going to answer that, because it will defeat your whole argument. Because in your eyes, a person that's a Jew by nationality has to be worshiping the Most High God, has to be circumcised in his flesh. Therefore, if they're not worshiping God and they're not uncircumcised in their flesh, there's just no way that they're descendants of Jacob. That's where your mind is. That's how small your mind is thinking. That's why you'll never answer that question. You don't want to answer it. And that's why this type of stream is needed. This is where the position of the likes of Akkad and Assad and Christians, guys like Vocab alone, it falls apart because they don't want to acknowledge this reality. That's the reason why the Christian church took away the Apocrypha, so you don't get proper understanding of what was happening between Malachi and Matthew, that what they call the intertestamental period, which is like half a freaking, it's like, dude, it's like half a millennia. It's literally 500 years, around 500 years of missing information about the Jews and what was happening with them. These same people, these same Christians, like the guy Jesus is King, these same people went around the whole earth and were forcing people, okay? Hold on. This is what they were doing. This is the Christianity that Jesus is King. This is the one that they still want us to be under. Watch this. Okay. This is the compulsory conversion of the Native Americans. They would come up with a cross, show you why Jesus, and if you didn't, you would have to bow down. You have to bow down by force, not by faith, but by force. This is what Jesus and King is trying to make us stay under. Compulsory conversion of Indians by Jesuit missionaries. If they did not do it, they put them to death. That's why they had the muskets. That's why they had their swords right there. Okay? Because if they didn't do it, they were put to death on the spot. This is the Christianity that all nations being saved is under. That's the United Nations doctrine. That's why, again, let me go back to it. Hold up. Let me go back to it. This is what y'all want. Y'all want the United Nations doctrine. All nations being saved. Okay? That's why I got this as the background on this. Y'all want every people. Now, granted, these nations are newly created, newly named. This is just a depiction. But I'm showing you the mentality of those that control the world, of what they're trying to give to you, which you're trying to put inside of the gospel, which the gospel was only meant for the children of Israel. That's why I say a lot of you guys, y'all think just like this.
New world order. New world order. New world order.
Y'all want all nations. That's why I say all nations under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. That y'all been programmed with that. The only nation that is meant to get everlasting salvation is the children of Israel. That's why it's read Daniel chapter 12. Daniel 12 says the salvation to thy people. It's plain and simple. That's why y'all say that being Israelite doesn't matter. See, this guy, this is your friend, Royal Netics. He says you are not Israel by birth or nationality any more than I am. Because to him, it doesn't matter. Like I told you, if you believe that all nations can be saved, then being an Israelite means nothing. Now, Jesus is king. Tell Royalnetics, because this is Royalnetics had something to say up here. This is Royalnetics. He's Royalnetics himself says that he's an Israelite. You need to tell him that he's not an Israelite. This is what Royalnetics said. So Jesus is king. Why don't you go ahead and rebuke him? Jesus is king. Go ahead and rebuke Royalnetics. He said that he is an Israelite. No, your lineage gives you the access to being saved. You being an Israelite gives you the access to being saved. Everlasting salvation is only for the Israelites. And that's what these Christians, they want us to come back under this. Okay? These white nationalist Christians, they want us to come back under this. This is how they introduce Christianity to the world. Okay? They sailed the 7 seas, conquered lands, took resources, raped women, raped children, forced hard bondage and labor under Christianity. This is what Jesus is king represents. This is the same people that Royalnetics wants to basically say they're the wild olive tree that was grafted in. This is Jesus King's forefathers forcing, by the force of the sword, conversion on the natives of the Americas. He says nothing about it. He doesn't even condemn it. He doesn't go about saying that this version of Christianity messed up what it's supposed to mean. But he's going to come on against me for saying that Israelites are the only ones that should be saved, and that's in the Bible. I'm showing Royalnetics that Jews were Hellenized and uncircumcised. He doesn't want acknowledgement. He only acknowledges Gentiles that he says are other nations as being the only ones who were Hellenized and uncircumcised. But when you ask him, what about the Jews? He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Okay. That's why Hakah and Hassad did not want to go into the various parts that really just put this stuff in proper place. So we're going to go ahead and finish this off. We're probably going to continue this another day. But we're going to go ahead and get one last precept. Close it off. Yep. Yeah, these guys, they keep on saying that, oh, you're wrong. Oh, it's this, is that. Okay. This is Joel chapter 2 and verse 27. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God and none else. And my people shall never be ashamed. So go ahead and sign it off. This is your brother Hawayala. And again, I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh. And we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior, Yahweh Shai. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.